I don't come in and usher world peace? Or
I don't know, because I mean I get so many people on the show saying that they're all warm and fuzzy and they're here to save mankind. I don't agree with that. Mary Joyce, I don't know if you know her. She runs a reporting center in North Carolina on UFOs and Bigfoot. And she, swears up and down there's an underground military base there with aliens, working with government officials. But they're the type of aliens you wouldn't want to meet in the alley, put it that way. But what's really interesting, you look at what happens with the cattle. I've been reading here recently, they've been getting reports like in Brazil and Argentina and some other places that they're finding humans now.
That's been happening for a while.
Yeah, that is really scary.
There's a story, I forget who it comes from. It's very old. But this researcher, he had been told a story by a guy in the Air Force and in Vietnam that there was a B-52. I think it was taking place, or I think it was part of Arc Light when they were bombing North Vietnam. And this B-52 had crashed, and they sent out a recovery team to recover the black boxes and destroy, sensitive communications equipment or whatever, and see if anybody had survived. And when they got to the B-52 had basically looked like it had literally fallen out of the sky, and it was resting on the tops of these trees. And when they got up inside of it, they actually found the entire crew still strapped into their seats, and a bunch of them had actually had things removed.
That is really scary. I mean, were they done the same way that the report I've been reading, where it was done, where it had been done with a laser or something that was so accurate that there was no way that somebody could have went out and done it with a scalpel or or whatever? Well,
a lot of times when you look at the cattle mutilations or the human mutilations, there have been some in Brazil. I remember that when they actually do analysis of the edges of the cuts, that not only are they cauterized. Number one, there's no blood. The blood's been drained, so it's been exsanguinated. Basically, the blood's drained out. So the blood's gone. The slices are cauterized, so they use some sort of a laser or high temperature knife blade to do it. And in some cases, I've seen reports where they say that the slices are actually between cells, and that could only be done with a laser. That the cell membranes in the skin were not actually ruptured.
Well, that tells me something is going on. I mean, there's so many reports right now. I know it's been going on, as you said, for a while, but I mean, there's been some new ones coming out that, actually photographs, and I was looking at them, and they didn't look doctored to me. I mean, I've done professional photography besides broadcasting for many years, and, I'm pretty good at Photoshop because I was one of the first people even to have Photoshop in the country. Right. I was one of the testers when it originally came out. And I looked at those, and I tell you, I wouldn't want to be in those countries and where those people were at.
I think that ufology suffers from, there are a lot of problems in ufology, right? But I think that ufology suffers from a couple of things specifically. One, I think that we lose track of the fact that whatever these things are, this 10% that we're talking about, that they are physical things. They are physical things piloted by physical beings, that they're not light, they're not, dimensional shifting. Maybe they are dimensional shifting, but that's the whole ultra-terrestrial thing. But they're, I firmly believe that if you see a UFO, it's a device that is piloted by something. It has an engine. It conforms to the laws of physics. It's not, maybe there's telepathy involved, maybe not, but it is a physical device that you could throw a rock and it would bounce off it. Right. And I think the other big problem that we face is that when you deal with that 10%, the aliens, right? That when you're dealing with an alien consciousness and the alien culture, right? We're ascribing human characteristics to them. So when you see a UFO and you think about the occupants, you're thinking about them in terms of human characteristics. They get angry, they get sad, they have emotions. They have feelings, that they care what you think, that they believe in God, or that they think that democracy is fantastic, or maybe they're Marxists, who knows. But the thing is that you're ascribing human MOs to aliens, and I don't think that you can do that. You don't know where they come from. You don't know how they think. They could see the universe in a radically different way. They could be what we would call amoral. They may have their own structure of morality. I mean, I don't think you can look at an alien and say to yourself, well, I understand what they're doing, because frankly, their brain may not be constructed like yours, and they may literally not think like you do. So, I think that that's two major problems, and that goes into the aliens are going to save us. And it's like, well, they haven't saved us yet.
No, if they
I've
were
been
going
waiting
to, they
since
would
the
have.
50s for them to save us, and it hasn't occurred. We haven't had the day the earth stood still in Klaatu, Verata, Nikto, and all that. But also, I think it's very dangerous to look at them and say, okay, well, they flew over a missile field and they shut down all the missiles. That means that they don't like nuclear war. No, you don't know why they did it. Maybe they did it because they didn't want you to fire one at them. Who knows? You can't really ascribe, human logic to an alien species.
Oh, you're so right. And like I always tell people, we eat everything, right, on this planet. Yep. We eat, cattle, we eat everything, even each other, still in some parts of this country, or world, I should say. Now, I mean, you have to look at, if they're so far advanced than us, they could look at us the same way we look at that deer or that McDonald's burger, and the people, like I said, a lot of people think they're here to save us. They're warm, they're fuzzy, they got orbs, they're doing all this stuff. We don't know anything about them. We don't know what their plans are, what they're thinking. Maybe they're watching to see how long it takes to us to destroy ourselves too.
They very well may be. And if I had to put any kind of human-based logic to it, I would argue that they're up there watching to see how we handle different events on a psychological and sociological level. But, in my mind, when I think about them, in order to get here from wherever they're from, Zeta Reticuli, Barnard Star, Alpha Centauri, the Pleiades, whatever, pick it, you're talking about a tremendous amount of distance. And in order to get here, right, at the speed of light, it would at a minimum take that decades to get here. If they can circumvent that problem and fold space or use, wormholes or whatever, the amount of power required to do that is exponential. So you're talking about a group of organisms that can construct things, that can deal with tremendous amounts of energy. And if they can harness that amount of energy, then in my mind, when they look at us, they don't look at us like cattle or mooses or rodents or anything else. I think they look at us like ants.
Probably. I hate to say it. I didn't want to say that, because if I did, I'm going to get like 800 emails tomorrow by calling human race ants.
You can send them to me.
Okay.
But I think that's true. And again, I don't think they're here to invade us, or they would have already done it. I don't think they're here to save us, or they would have already done it. I think they're here to watch us.
Well, I think they've been watching us a lot longer than people even realize. This is not just gone back to the 50s. This goes back, mankind, and since we started, on this earth. And I think we've been watched. I think we might be very interesting to them, like a video game. I hate to say it, but I mean, they're probably looking at us and saying,
Sim City. It's Sim City on a mass scale. And I think that when you look at what they do, right, there are stories like the person who was abducted in New York City. I mean, there are those kinds of stories, but the vast majority of UFO sightings that are large-scale UFO sightings or abductions take place in the middle of nowhere. You may see a UFO fly over your house in the suburbs, but I think that's the exception, not the rule. And the landings take place in the middle of the forest, like Travis Walton, or, they take place out in the boonies. And I think that there's a good reason for that. They want to pick somebody up, maybe, run a bunch of tests on them and whatever, but they don't really want to be seen. They don't really want to interact that much, or they would. I mean, there are cases where interactions have taken place, and I can't explain to you why. I remember my friend Clyde, he has a radio show, and one of the interesting things about Clyde is that Clyde speaks fluent Spanish. He had lived for some time down in South America, and he speaks really, really good Spanish, like fluent Spanish. And there was a case called, he called it the friendship enigma, but I think it was in Chile, that these guys on shortwave started to get, because a lot of remote villages, they communicate on shortwave, and they had started to get messages from they thought they were aliens from a ship that the aliens called they just called it the Friendship. And the aliens were speaking to them in Spanish. And the messages, it was your kind of classic kind of messages from the beyond of, we want world peace and all this kind of stuff. But the interesting thing was that they spoke to them in perfect Spanish, and he could understand it, but he said that there was something weird about the message when he listened to it. And he had a friend who was a Spanish professor who also taught linguistics, and he took a recording of it. Huh?
No, I didn't say. I'm busy listening to you. I'm sorry.
There was a buzz. He took it to a friend of his who's a professor of Spanish language and linguistics, and he asked her to listen to it to kind of figure out if she could find a dialect, because like Spanish, like all languages, there are dialects. I mean, in America we have dialects. I live in California. Well, I have a California dialect. I use words like bitchin' and stuff, hella and stuff like that. You can figure out where I'm from based on the fact that I use hella. It's a Northern California kind of thing. And, the South, the East, the Midwest, the North, Pacific Northwest, there's all kinds of weird dialects. Well, the Spanish is the same way. The Cubans speak it differently than somebody from Costa Rica versus somebody from Chile. And when she listened to the Spanish language, she said, this is completely devoid of a dialect, that the inflection is perfect. It's actually spoken literally perfectly. And you think about that for a minute, all your listeners out there, you're sitting at home, you call up your friend and you go, hey, what's cooking? Or, how are you doing today? Or, you use a lot of slang and the way that you pronounce words, drifts, and we speak fast as English speakers and all this other stuff. Well, whoever this was, they spoke it at a measured rate. There was no dialect. There was no deviation from textbook Spanish. It was literally like somebody picked up a textbook and spoke it perfectly. And she's like, that's not possible, because anybody who speaks colloquial Spanish or English or German or Italian or Russian or anything else, they're going to infuse local idioms into the language.
Oh, yeah.
She says there's nothing. It was perfect. Maybe they were aliens. I don't know. But that was definitely one where they had a communication. They actually recorded it, and it was very bizarre. So you do see that happen from time to time. But I do think in general they're just watching us.
Yeah, boy, I wonder if they have anything planned. I mean, we like when we went to the moon. The reports that we were told not to go back to the moon and all that stuff, and we haven't. And it just makes you wonder if there's things that we're not being told. Do you honestly think that the American or Russian or the Chinese people, if they were told that there were aliens visiting our planet and there were actual UFOs, how do you think the average person would handle it?
Well, that goes back to the Brookings study. And I think today